I showed up to my own son's wedding in a tailored suit, gift in hand, heart full, and he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Dad, I'm sorry, but you're not needed here." Told me to leave, quietly, to avoid embarrassment. So I did. But 30 minutes later, the payments for the venue, catering, and honeymoon were canceled. No participation, no wedding. They thought I'd just swallow the humiliation and still pay the bill. But I didn't raise my son to be cruel. And I sure as hell didn't raise myself to be used. What happened next turned the happiest day of their lives into a very public disaster, and the day I finally walked away for good. Let me hear from you in the comment section. Tell me what you would have done if you found yourself in my position. Please subscribe for more stories like this. Now, let me tell you what happened. I used to think raising a child alone was the hardest thing I'd ever do. I was wrong. Watching that same child, grown now, standing tall in a rented tux, look me in the eyes and tell me I wasn't wanted at his wedding. That was worse. That was the kind of pain that doesn't just hit your heart. It echoes through your chest, runs cold through your blood, and leaves you standing there, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and devastation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to when I was just dad. The one who packed lunches, worked overtime, skipped vacations, and stayed up late figuring out how to braid hair and tie tiny shoelaces. My son, David, was 5 when his mother walked out. No drama, no fireworks, just a note on the kitchen table that said she wasn't built for this kind of life. I remember the way David asked me that night if she'd be back by Christmas. She never was. From that moment on, it was him and me. I built my life around him. Every decision I made, from the jobs I took to the house I bought, came down to one question. Will this be good for David? And for years, I thought he saw that. I thought he felt it. But people change, especially when new people walk into their life. It started small. A missed call here, a late text there. Then weekends that used to be ours suddenly weren't. I was happy he had found someone. Ashley seemed sweet enough. Polite. She smiled a lot, though never quite in my direction. But still, I gave them space. Love needs room to grow. That's what I told myself when I didn't get asked to help with wedding planning. Or when the father of the groom, duties were quietly assigned to Ashley's stepfather. I chalked it up to modern weddings. Maybe I was old-fashioned. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Or rather, the lack of an invite. I found out about it through my niece, who texted me a photo of the evening. There was David, standing beside Ashley's family, smiling wide. I waited 2 days before asking him about it. His response was a shrug and a casual. We kept it small. Just immediate family. I wanted to ask what that made me, but I didn't. I swallowed it. The week before the wedding, I sat alone at my kitchen table, wedding gift in hand, checkbook beside me. I had already paid the deposit for the venue months ago, helped with early costs when Ashley's parents were sorting things out. The final payment was due the day of. I told David I'd handle it, that it would be my gift to them. He thanked me over text. No call, just a thumbs-up emoji. Still, I told myself, he's stressed. He's getting married. It's not personal. But oh, it was. The morning of the wedding, I put on my best suit. Navy, tailored, still holding its shape despite the years. I looked in the mirror and told myself this was going to be a good day. I'd take my seat, smile through the ceremony, maybe even get a dance in. I didn't need a spotlight. I just wanted to be there. I arrived 15 minutes early. The venue was gorgeous, sunlight coming through the tall windows, rows of white chairs set up with precision. A soft string quartet played somewhere inside. I stood near the entrance, taking it all in. That's when David walked out from the back, flanked by one of Ashley's cousins. He looked tense. "Dad," he said, pulling me aside. "I need to talk to you for a second." I followed him, heart pounding, unsure why. Then he said it. Calmly, quietly, like he was trying not to make a scene. "Dad, I'm sorry, but you're not needed here. Ashley's family said it might be uncomfortable with everything that's been going on. So, could you just go? Quietly. Please. Just so we can avoid any embarrassment." I didn't speak. Not right away. I don't even think I blinked. My ears rang. My throat burned. I looked at my son, my boy, and I couldn't recognize him. All I could do was nod. Because what was I supposed to say? Beg to stay? No. I had more dignity than that. So I left. I walked past the guests arriving, past the usher who looked confused, past the flower arrangements I had unknowingly helped fund. I got into my car, sat there in silence, and then I started making calls. I sat in the parking lot longer than I cared to admit. My hands were clenched around the steering wheel, not because I was angry, at least not yet, but because I was trying to stop myself from shaking. I wasn't sure if it was adrenaline, shock, or heartbreak. Maybe all three. I stared through the windshield at the blur of guests still arriving, smiling and straightening ties, completely unaware that the groom's father had just been quietly exiled like a family secret no one wanted exposed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, suspended in that moment, still in my suit, still holding the wedding card in the center console like it meant something. The card I had picked out the night before, rewrote 3 times, and signed, "Love always, Dad." The one with a check folded inside. A generous one. I didn't do it to show off. I did it because I believed, stupidly, that love was something you showed, not just said. I watched a few people glance my way, likely wondering why I wasn't going inside. But no one came up to the car. No one texted. David had delivered his message and vanished back inside to take pictures or say vows, or whatever people do before pretending everything is fine. I remember reaching over and taking the card from the console. I opened it, pulled the check out, and ripped it clean in half. Then I made the first call. "Hi, this is Charles Miller. I'm calling about the Whitmore Green wedding. I need to speak to your event manager." "Yes, it's urgent." The woman's tone changed quickly once she realized who I was. Money tends to do that. I explained that I was the primary contact and financial backer for the wedding venue, and that I wanted to cancel the remaining payment due today. She hesitated, asked if I was sure. "Yes," I said flatly. "If my presence isn't needed, neither is my wallet." She asked if I wanted to speak with the groom. I almost laughed. "No, I've already heard what he thinks." Then came the caterers. Then the honeymoon agency. I hadn't paid the full amount yet, just the deposits. They were all scheduled to charge the remaining balances on the wedding day, per agreement. That was my arrangement. Not David's. Not Ashley's. Mine. And now? It was over. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I thought I'd feel some kind of smug satisfaction. But as I drove away from the venue, the knot in my chest didn't loosen. All I felt was hollow. But that changed 30 minutes later. The first text came from my niece, Brielle. "Uncle Charles. What happened?" The venue just paused everything. "They told Ashley they need to speak to the account holder. People are whispering. Did you leave already?" I didn't respond. I just kept driving. Then came another one, this time from my sister. "Charlie, did you pull the payments? Ashley's mom is freaking out. There's no food. What's going on?" I pulled over. I stared at the screen as messages started flooding in, one after another. Some from family, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently, it didn't take long for the story to spread. The groom's father, financially and emotionally absent, as Ashley's aunt reportedly said, had apparently pulled the rug out from under the whole wedding out of spite. That was the first version of the story. Convenient, isn't it? Stripped me of my role and the truth. Then my phone rang. His name lit up the screen, David. For a second, I thought maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he realized what he'd done. Maybe he was ready to fix it. I answered. "Dad," he snapped, not even waiting for me to say hello. "What the hell did you do?" I stayed quiet. "Did you seriously cancel the payments?" The venue's threatening to shut down the ceremony. Ashley's crying. Her parents are yelling. It's AF ***** ein mess here. I took a breath. "You told me I wasn't needed," I said calmly. "So I assumed that extended to my money. That's not how this works." "No," I replied. "Seems like exactly how it works. You made it clear I was an outsider." "Outsiders don't pay for the party." There was a pause, and then, "This is your fault," he snapped. "You just embarrassed me in front of everyone. Do you know how this makes me look?" That was when the rage finally surfaced. "How you look?" I repeated, voice rising. "You told your own father to leave his son's wedding like a stray dog. And you're worried about how you look?" "Dad." "No, David. I stayed quiet when you left me out of the rehearsal. I stayed quiet when you started treating me like a background character in your life. But I won't stay quiet when you humiliate me to my face and expect me to foot the bill afterward. There was silence. Heavy, hot silence. Then I heard him mutter something under his breath. I didn't catch it. Didn't need to. I hung up. By the time I got home, the wedding was already starting to unravel. The ceremony went forward, technically, but the reception was gutted. No food. No music. No alcohol. Guests left early. Ashley's parents were seen arguing in the lobby. And David? He disappeared with a few groomsmen, furious and embarrassed, too proud to admit he had pushed the one man who had always been in his corner too far. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I sat in my living room, loosened my tie, and watched the sunset pour in through the window like it had every evening since he was a boy. Only this time, the silence felt final. The next morning, I expected the phone to ring. I thought someone, David, maybe Ashley, maybe even her parents, would reach out, if not with an apology, then at least with some attempt to clean up the mess. Something mature, something human. But the silence stretched from sunrise to noon, then into early afternoon like a punishment. It wasn't just silence, it was strategy. A deliberate refusal to acknowledge what had happened, as if they could will it into non-existence by pretending I didn't matter. I'd seen this behavior before. Not from David. He hadn't always been like this, but from people who were so used to being catered to, so conditioned to avoid accountability, that the truth became an inconvenience instead of a compass. But I wasn't going to be the one to break first. By the end of that week, the story had taken on a life of its own. Family group chats were lighting up, cousins asking what really happened, aunts throwing in their opinions, people choosing sides based on hearsay and half-truths. Some believed David's version, that I sabotaged the wedding out of jealousy or control. Others, the ones who knew me, kept quiet but firm in their support. It was my daughter, David's younger sister, Megan, who finally called. "Dad," she said gently, "do you want to come over for dinner? Just you and me." That invite alone nearly broke me. I drove to her place in silence, same as I had the day of the wedding. But this time, when I walked up to the door, someone was actually happy to see me. She pulled me into a hug and held on longer than she had in years. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what he did, for what he said." I swallowed hard. "He made his choice," I said. "I'm just trying to live with mine." We sat at her kitchen table, eating takeout Chinese and sipping on ginger ale. She didn't press. She just let me talk. And when I was done, she didn't try to defend her brother. She didn't play neutral. "I think Ashley pushed him into it," she said finally. "I've seen the way she talks about our side of the family, always correcting him, making these little comments about how chaotic we are." "She didn't put the words in his mouth," I said. "He made the decision. I won't make excuses for him." Megan nodded. "I'm glad you stood your ground, even if it blew everything up." I looked at her, this woman who once sat on my shoulders during fireworks shows, who cried when David left for college. She had grown into someone sharp and fiercely loyal, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the villain. "Me too," I said. 2 days later, David called again. Not to say sorry, not to fix anything, but to tell me that Ashley's parents were considering legal action. Apparently, the cancellation of the honeymoon had cost them something, some upgrade they'd already promised to guests or a non-refundable bonus trip. Whatever it was, they were angry. Ashley's father had left me 3 voicemails, full of the kind of passive-aggressive rage people like him specialize in. David's tone on the call wasn't angry this time. It was cold, flat, like he'd finally decided that I wasn't a father anymore. Just a problem to be handled. "I just think you should make this right," he said. "By doing what?" I asked. "Writing another check so they can pretend I don't exist again." "You did promise to pay," he said. "We signed contracts with those expectations." "No," I said. "I signed the contracts. I controlled the payments. And I canceled them after you told me to leave." He sighed. "So you're really not going to fix this?" I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted him to feel the silence this time. "No, David. I'm not." That was the line. There was no screaming, no dramatic exit, just a final click as he hung up, and the distinct sound of a bridge burning. The fallout continued in small, but noticeable ways. Family friends stopped calling, some out of discomfort, others, I suspect, out of fear they'd be caught in the middle. One uncle sent me a text that read, "You know I love you, but you should have handled that differently." I didn't bother responding. Anyone who thought I was the one who started this hadn't been paying attention for years. But I also got quiet support. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in months emailed me to say he admired the boundary I set. One of David's old high school friends messaged me privately and said, "You were always there for him. He's changed. I'm sorry it came to this." Even the venue manager emailed me days later, not about payments, but just to say, "I'm sorry how that unfolded. You did what you had to do." Strange how strangers can see what family refuses to. I wasn't trying to ruin my son's life. I wasn't trying to cause a scene. I just finally understood that love without respect isn't love at all. It's expectation, obligation, transaction, and I was done being part of a relationship that only valued me when my signature was on a check. I'd spent decades being the dependable one, the rock, the dad who showed up, paid the bills, smiled in photos. But that man didn't have a seat at the wedding. That man was told he wasn't needed. So I let him go. It started with a Facebook post. Nothing dramatic. No names. Just a vague status update from one of Ashley's bridesmaids. Some people are so petty it's honestly disgusting. Ruining a wedding out of jealousy? Grow up. But it was enough. Within hours, people were in the comments speculating. Some mentioned family drama. A few even dropped David's name. And suddenly, the truth, or at least versions of it, started making its way through our small community like wildfire. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for every vague accusation or passive-aggressive jab, someone else, someone who knew me, really knew me, spoke up. Charles paid for almost everything. He was always there for David, single dad since we were kids. There's more to that story than they're letting on. It wasn't a tidal wave, but it was steady, quiet support, like distant thunder, calm but undeniable. And while I stayed silent online, the real storm was unfolding in person. Apparently, Ashley's parents were furious that I had pulled out, not just at the financial level, but at the public level. The reception being cut short had caused a domino effect. Guests left early. Vendors packed up. There was no DJ, no dinner, just a lot of awkward standing around and gossip in the corners. Word got out that David's own father had been dismissed before the ceremony, that he had been told to leave. Once people heard that, opinions started shifting fast. I heard from my niece Brielle again, this time on a video call. She looked frustrated, but also a little gleeful in the way only someone who loves family drama can be. "You want the full report?" she asked. I nodded. "Okay, so, half the guests think Ashley's mom is a control freak. She apparently spent the whole reception pacing around like a CEO losing a merger. And when they realized the bar had been cut off early, oh my God, Uncle Charles, people were mad." Her dad was arguing with the venue staff. It got loud. I raised an eyebrow. Loud how? Like, security came over and everything. I left early. But yeah, it was a mess. And when people found out you were told to leave before the ceremony, most people flipped. A couple of Ashley's uncles left because of that. I sat there, quietly taking it all in. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. But I did feel something I hadn't felt in days. Understood. Brielle leaned closer to the camera. "I just want you to know," she said softly, "you did the right thing. I would have done the same. And honestly, David needs to wake the hell up." But David didn't wake up. Not yet. Instead, I got another call, this time from Ashley herself. I didn't recognize the number, so I answered it out of reflex. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice clipped, all sugar and vinegar. "I just want to understand what kind of man abandons his own son on his wedding day." I closed my eyes. "Are you asking because you want to listen, or because you want to accuse me?" There was a pause. "I just think you made things unnecessarily difficult." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the arrogance in her voice was so blindingly familiar. She sounded like someone who had never once questioned whether she might be part of the problem. "I paid for your wedding venue. I paid for the caterer. The honeymoon. I gave you everything you needed to start that day right. And you both told me to leave. You embarrassed him," she snapped. "No," I said, "he embarrassed himself. And I gave him exactly what he asked for. No participation, no support. That's the deal. You can't humiliate someone and expect their wallet to smile through it." She didn't respond right away. I imagined her clenching her jaw, phone in hand, trying to decide whether to push or retreat. Finally, she said, "You've damaged a lot of relationships." "I've clarified them," I said. "There's a difference." Then I hung up. Days passed, and then came the fallout I didn't expect. David lost his job. It wasn't directly related to the wedding, but it came at the worst possible time. A project failed. A promotion didn't land. And without the wedding gifts or the honeymoon to escape into, real life came crashing in hard and fast. He didn't call me, but Megan heard through a mutual friend, and she told me gently, trying to gauge my reaction. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "Not because you owe him anything, just because you're still his dad." I nodded. Let the silence sit. "I do still love him," I said. "That's not what this was ever about. I didn't pull out because I stopped loving him. I pulled out because I finally started loving myself too." That truth hit me harder than anything else. Because for so long, I had bent and folded myself into whatever shape my children needed. I had paid, fixed, supported, forgiven. But this wedding, was the first time I had drawn a line and meant it. And now, that line had changed everything. By the second week, the phone had stopped ringing altogether. It's a strange kind of quiet, the one that follows a family explosion. It's not peaceful. It's cautious. Everyone walks on tiptoe, pretending nothing happened but holding their breath, waiting to see if the dust will ever settle. Only this time, I wasn't waiting. I was done waiting. The silence was my boundary, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation for it anymore. Most people stopped asking questions. But some still circled like vultures, trying to get their version of the story validated. My older cousin Henry called me under the pretense of just checking in, but I knew better. He danced around the issue until I finally interrupted him. "Henry, if you're calling to find out whether I regret what I did, let me save you the trouble." "I don't." There was a pause, then that classic half laugh he always used when trying to stay neutral. "Well, it was dramatic, Charles." So was being told I wasn't needed at my son's wedding. He went quiet. I could hear him shift in his seat. All right, fair. But the biggest shift came when Megan, my daughter, my anchor in all this, finally had enough of the family whispers. We were having dinner again, this time at a quiet diner on the edge of town. She had been unusually quiet all evening, pushing her food around her plate. "They're saying you ruined everything," she said finally, eyes still down. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Uncle Henry, Aunt Rochelle, some of David's friends. Even Ashley's cousin posted something again." I leaned back. "Let them talk." She looked up. "I'm tired of them pretending you're the villain. You're the only one who was honest in all of this." Her voice shook, just a little. And it hit me. She wasn't just frustrated. She was hurt too. She hadn't just watched her brother push me out. She had watched her entire extended family either stay silent or choose convenience over truth. "I want to say something," she said. "Publicly." "No," I said gently. "Don't put yourself in the middle." "I already am in the middle," she snapped. "Everyone keeps asking me what happened. I'm done pretending." I knew Megan well enough to know when her mind was made up. She wasn't reckless. She was purposeful. She didn't want drama. She wanted to reclaim the truth. So she posted it. A simple paragraph on her social media. Nothing flashy. No names. Just truth. Sometimes the parent who walks away isn't the one who failed. Sometimes it's the one who finally says, "Enough." I watched my dad give everything to people who gave him nothing but silence and shame in return. He didn't ruin anything. He just stopped funding his own mistreatment. I stand with him. The reaction was immediate. Support came pouring in. People shared it, commented, sent her private messages saying they'd been through similar things. A few had the nerve to push back, but she stood her ground. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I hadn't just survived the storm. I had raised someone strong enough to walk through it with her head high. David still didn't reach out. Not after the post. Not after the job loss. Not even when I heard that he and Ashley had to cancel the lease on their new apartment due to financial strain. Everything they had built for their perfect day had begun to collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. And yet, I didn't feel satisfaction. Only clarity. This wasn't punishment. This was cause and effect. He had drawn a line when he told me I wasn't needed. I had simply accepted it. Fully. But one night, While sitting in my study, I found myself looking through old photo albums. David in his Little League uniform, his awkward prom tux, him and Megan on Christmas morning with chocolate all over their faces. Back then, love wasn't complicated. Back then, he looked at me like I was invincible. I closed the album. That version of us was gone. Not because I stopped trying, but because I finally stopped chasing. It's been 3 months. 3 months since the wedding that wasn't really a wedding. 3 months since I stood in a parking lot in my best suit, holding a card no one wanted, and walked away from a son who had already left me long before he said the words. People still ask. They still dance around it at family gatherings, or drop it into small talk like they're not sure whether to pick a side or pretend it didn't happen. How's David? Have you two spoken yet? Weddings are stressful, you know. Things get said. But family's family, right? I don't flinch anymore. I don't try to defend myself or retell the story in a way that makes me look better. I just smile, take a sip of whatever's in front of me, and say, he made his choices. I made mine. And that's the truth. Because this wasn't about a wedding. Not really. It was about years of being slowly erased. About realizing that love, when it's only expected and never returned, becomes a weight you carry alone. It's exhausting. And I was tired of carrying something so one-sided. I used to think a father's job was to give and give and give. That the reward was just in watching your child become their own person. But I've learned that boundaries are love too. That teaching someone how to treat you, even when it's your own blood, is the most honest thing you can do. David hasn't reached out since the day he called me to blame me for the wedding collapse. No text, no email, not even a photo from the so-called reception. It's like I was cut out of the final draft of his life story, and that used to sting. Now it just tells me exactly where I stand. And that's a place I've come to accept, not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Not with revenge, but with resolution. Last week, I saw Megan again. She came by with a tray of baked ziti, the kind her mother used to make before she left. We talked about work, laughed over old sitcoms, and avoided the topic of her brother until the dishes were done. When she finally did bring him up, it was soft. Careful. He's not doing great, she said. Still out of work. Ashley's parents are helping with rent. I nodded. That's unfortunate. She studied me. You don't want to reach out? I looked at her. Really looked at her. No, I said. Because if I do, he'll think nothing's changed. That he can humiliate me, cut me out, and still have access to the parts of me that cost nothing. She didn't push. She understood. I still keep a drawer in my desk with old cards David made me. Father's Day drawings. Construction paper Father of the Year medals. Notes with crooked letters that said things like, "You're my hero," and "Thanks for being the best dad." Sometimes I read them, not because I'm clinging to the past, but because I want to remind myself that I was the father I promised to be. And I never stopped being him. Even when the thanks ran out. Even when the phone stopped ringing. Even when the seat at the wedding was filled by someone else. In the end, I wasn't needed. But I will be remembered, not just for pulling the payments, but for finally pulling the plug on a relationship that treated me like a resource instead of a father. And that's the legacy I'll leave. Not one of endless giving, but of self-respect. If David ever wants to find his way back to me, the road will still be there. But this time, he'll have to walk it. Fully. Honestly. And if not, I've made peace with that too. If this story hit you where it hurts, if you've ever been the one who gave and gave, only to be pushed aside when it mattered most, tell me in the comments. Have you ever drawn a line in the sand with family? What happened after? Your story might just be the one someone else needs to hear today.